by far, the most popular and most important guest I've ever had in my books or articles or podcasts or videos is a former prison psychologist named Marlon Newbern. And Newbern was, we just met. He just called me up and said, Colin, I've been in the belly of the beast for a very long time. I just retired, and I would really like to tell people what's going on with this level of black criminality that we find on the streets, in the courts, and the prisons. So that's what he did over several podcasts, several videos, several things we put in my book, especially Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. So, unfortunately, Marlon left us way too soon. He died a year or so ago. But we still have these great podcasts of him telling the truth, of him really going to a deeper level, telling us what's down there. And I just can't listen to these things enough. And I know a lot of you guys want to listen to them again. So this is a podcast we did with Marlon from a couple of years ago, but it could have been a couple of minutes ago. I heard from a reader of Don't Make the Black Kids Angry today. He lives in Ireland. He said, Colin, I know you don't like to do predictions and all that stuff, but how's this all going to end? And I said, I don't see how it ends well. But how whatever small chance we have for it ending well is going to depend on brave people like our featured guest on this podcast tonight. We're going to be talking with former prison psychologist Marlon Newbern. Hi, this is Colin Flaherty. I'm the author of Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. Here we talk about black mob violence, black on white crime, and the greatest lie of this generation, the myth of black victimization, all without racism, without rancor, without apologies. So Marlon Newbern, as some of you may know, spent 30 years in the belly of the beast, prison psychologist, court-appointed psychologist, evaluating convicts, felons, people in prison, out of prison, going to prison, under arrest, going to be under arrest. He's seen it all, heard all the excuses. And he left the prison system after 30 years, about a year or two ago. He is coming forward to tell the truth about black mob violence, black on white crime, black on white hostility. This dude is a hero. But before we hear from Marlon and we really get into it here tonight, I thought we'd do a little reality check. Just went into my files, grabbed a few audio clips from some of the news stories just to kind of place us in the frame of mind to remind us what the stakes are.
Good morning. Well, this story contains some graphic pictures and details that may not be appropriate for some, but 21-year-old Jared Pelletier says he wishes he never stopped at this A&Y quick stop on Shreveport Blanchard Road, especially after what happened to his girlfriend, 18-year-old Jessica Barnes-Lard. Now, Sunday night, Jessica stayed in the car as Pelletier went in the store. When he came out, several men were around the car saying inappropriate things to her. That's when a fight broke out between Pelletier and the men. As the couple tries to drive off, a metal bar hit Jessica in the face.
I feel guilty because I think that what they were throwing was meant for me, but it hit her. She was still is beautiful.
It's heartbreaking because she is such a sweet girl.
Now, Jessica was seriously hurt in the incident. She had 10 teeth knocked out and her upper lip is split, among other injuries. She will need reconstruction surgery. Now, the boyfriend received some bumps and bruises, but he's hurting more knowing the condition of his girlfriend.
Mark and Alexis Schaefer had gone out with their newborn baby, Alan, for the first time to a dinner at a friend's house. They were walking home around 10:30 when a car passed by them and then came to a sudden stop. They say two young men got out with guns. They made Mark get on the ground with a gun pointed at his head. They had the other gun pointed at Alexis. They stole their phones. They pulled the diaper bag off the stroller, knocking it over with their newborn
and attempted
inside.
robbery, and two of them are also facing possession of a weapon during a violent crime. Take a look at the suspects. Here they are: Tavares Stewberry, Xavier Martin, Aquavius Ray, and Tyrus Woodruff. Ray and Woodruff are the ones who are facing that additional charge. We're told by deputies they were the shooters in this case. Now, all of them are accused of creating this scene on Country Club Road yesterday afternoon. Deputies say they broke into a home there and shot a resident in the hip.
We're about to show you graphic surveillance video that captures the violent confrontation at a Walgreens parking lot. The victim had just left the store and was about to put the items in her car's trunk. That's when a man walks up to her and yanks her purse, slamming her to the ground.
I yanked back because I was mad. So I held on to it, and we had kind of like a tug of war.
It's not as easy to snatch as he hoped. It's hard to watch as he drags her right across the lot.
And kind of flipped it over, which flipped me over onto the ground. And so that's how he got my purse.
Police say the suspect and the driver got away in this stolen car. All that trouble for $60 inside the purse. She says a woman in a car saw what happened, pulled over to make sure she was okay. The driver went inside Walgreens, bought her a bottled water, and let her borrow her cell phone to call police. Police say the pair seen in this picture robbed two other women days later. In one case, a victim hurt her head pretty bad.
Look, I know this is a podcast, but you just have to find some time to get over to my YouTube channel and see the couple of the videos where these news stories just came from. You see some black people they didn't knock her down. They grabbed her purse and pulled her down. And then you see her being dragged across the parking lot. That's about as bad as it gets, people. We're not done yet, because guess what? Every one of these stories we do, I feel like I'm just putting a thimble in a fire hose. And let's hear a few more stories. These are all recent.
Cal Expo police are investigating a reported stabbing, and they've made an arrest for a loaded handgun found in a car on the last day of the state fair. Both incidents may be tied to videos showing a chaotic scene and violence inside the Cal Expo gates that night.
CBS 13 Steve Large is live at Cal Expo with eyewitness accounts. Steve?
These cell phone videos are being shared by hundreds of people tonight. Cal Expo police won't talk about what the videos show, but they are asking for your help to track down the people responsible. Cell phone videos capture the unusual backdrop for the brutal attacks. With a stuffed Minion movie character caught in the chaos here. And the neon lights of fair rides shown as fists fly here. Carmen Garcia was at the Cal Expo Fairgrounds recording with her cell phone.
I'm just like, people need to see this.
She and her brother watched it unfold.
It's supposed to be a place for families and kids to have fun and enjoy it while it's here.
Instead of family fun, the videos posted online show fists flying and what appears to be a series of violent clashes between fairgoers on the final night of the fair. Cal Expo officials refused to talk on camera about the videos, instead releasing a statement. They are investigating 3 incidents at the fairgrounds from this night, including a reported stabbing. Police found a knife.
I want to see like basically justice for the people that got jumped and hurt for no reason. Like, they were innocent and they were just trying to enjoy their time.
This is not the first violent end to the state fair. On the final day of the 2013 fair, this cell phone video captured another melee stopped by police. A fairgrounds turned fighting ring.
Yeah, there was a lot of little kids everywhere.
A danger zone in the middle of this family-themed event, now sparking a new Cal Expo police investigation. Aside from the stabbing, the reported stabbing, police say they did arrest one man who was driving near Cal Expo. They searched his car, found a loaded handgun, but they're not saying any details about how that particular arrest might be related to what the video shows inside that night.
A 17-day run of the state fair ended with a bang in more ways than one. Fairgoers reported sporadic fights and altercations among groups of young people during perhaps the biggest attendance day of the fair. Fox 40's Lonnie Wong tells us that fair officials say it was merely a small blip in what was considered a huge success.
This cell phone video shows one of numerous fights that broke out among young people at different locations last evening. Things happened so fast that State Fair police couldn't respond right away. But they did respond, mixing it up with people who seemed to resist efforts to maintain order. At one point, there were reports that someone had been stabbed, but that turned out to be a false report. And the report that a gun was found could not be confirmed initially. Rowdiness is nothing out of the ordinary at state fairs throughout the years, almost always involving young people and often alcohol. State Fair officials were not overly concerned about last night's events.
To the contrary, State Fair officials say they were pleased with the way things went over the 17-day run.
If you ask that reporter or his friends or some people in his audience, they'll tell you that last guy is a guy who always looks for the positive. He wants to bring out the best in people. He wants to encourage and empower people with all these positive stories that he does. Well, let me tell you something very positive. This reporter and people like him throughout the country are positively putting people in danger by ignoring, denying, minimizing the violence, the racial violence. Teenagers? Alcohol? Really? Listen, and don't make the black kids angry. I documented dozens and dozens, as in 24 to 50. County fairs and carnivals that have shut down over the last couple of years because of frequent, regular occurrences of black mob violence. Everybody has put their hands up and says, we can't do this anymore. Then I documented another group of fairs and carnivals and parades and festivals that wished they had shut down. And because of people like this reporter, nobody's connecting the dots. Everybody's pretending it's normal. It's not normal. We're connecting the dots. Let's go to the next story.
Attempted armed robbery at the Bouchards near Meineke and Martin Luther King Drive shows just how brazen the suspects were in the break-in.
Persons who tried to break into a store that night not only intended to steal, but I think they intended to kill him.
John Shiro represents the owner of Bouchards. He says the video clearly illustrates how the suspects rammed the back of a stolen minivan into concrete posts blocking the entrance. Then the men jump out and try to squeeze through the opening of the gate.
When Mr. Mars saw these fellows, he immediately, because he saw that they were armed and that they saw him and that they were kind of making eye contact, like, are you really going to come in? And they started coming in. He momentarily didn't realize that his pistol was right there. He went into the back room and got the rifle which he used.
One of the men shot multiple times is 21-year-old Deshaun Bird McWay. He's charged in the break-in. He was apparently taken by his friends in a getaway car to a nearby hospital, where he's refused to cooperate with police.
I believe they have captured the man who killed a mother. 30-year-old Theon Sampson was booked with one count of second-degree murder yesterday. 31-year-old Lindsay Nichols' body was found in the trunk of her burned car June 21st at the corner of Lake Forest and Michoud Boulevards. The coroner determined Nichols died of a gunshot wound. Sampson is being held on a $2.5 million.
All right, you've had your appetizers. Let's get to the main course. Marla Newburn, you wrote a fantastic article for American Thinker about fetal alcohol syndrome and how a black psychologist or psychiatrist
Yeah.
he discovered that behind all this violence and racial animosity is fetal alcohol syndrome. What's that article all about?
It's he's saying that the answer to black violence in the young violent black male is due to fetal alcohol syndrome, where the mother ingested drugs or alcohol, primarily alcohol, obviously.
Yeah. Quick question: for these purposes, are those two things kind of synonymous?
Yeah, pretty much so. It causes neurological damage in the baby. And so when they drink alcohol to excess, actually at all, or use drugs, the baby is being subject to it as well. It goes through the child. So when the child is born, they could have neurological damage due to the alcohol use in particular. And what the psychiatrist is a physician who has gone for 2 years to get their licensing in psychiatry, and they are in the mental health field, and they prescribed medication. They don't do psychological testing. They're not trained in that.
People don't know that, do they?
No, they don't. No. So he had this huge sample of what he said were violent young black males, and they all have fetal alcohol syndrome.
And how did he figure that out?
He didn't explain it in the news article. It wasn't explained. The thing is, there's no documentation. There's no research in the history of that disorder to show that it is a primary cause of violence. It isn't. They are low functioning, that's for sure. They're easily frustrated because they're perpetual children. But they have definite physical features that you can detect it right away.
What would that, if you were looking at me, how would you know if I had fetal alcohol syndrome?
Well, there's that little gap between your nose and your lip, that would be smooth and closer, It
hold on, say that again, between my nose and my lip.
Yeah, there's a smooth ridge between the nose and upper lip. Okay. Also, they'd have a small head, very small, considerably smaller. It's noticeable.
You and I were talking about this last week, and I gave you my layman's understanding that people with fetal alcohol syndrome had larger foreheads. So I was for the first time in my life 100% incorrect on that.
Yeah, that was that's hydrocephalus, and it meaning greater fluid on the brain. So, and that's its own malady in itself. But there's also no real indicator of automatic violence for that population. So, but with fetal alcohol syndrome, when people want to be tested for it, it's relatively easy to test for that. There's a psychological battery you put them through. And then you write up ultimate evaluation and give your opinion. But when they come in for an evaluation, they're noticeable. It's by their physical appearance. Never had one when I worked for the courts, worked for law firms, or worked as a prison psychologist. Never once did I have someone, and we're talking literally hundreds of cases, who had fetal alcohol syndrome. It was never even brought up. Now, in the article I wrote, I took a paragraph out just to shorten it up, but I kind of wish I hadn't. I didn't mention that I was a psychologist. Clinical psychologists are the ones who do the testing to find out, and a developmental psychologist is the primary evaluator of somebody with fetal alcohol syndrome. But clinical psychologists can do the testing. That's what I am, clinical psychologist. I didn't put this in the article. And those black males who are up for parole, some will send out a notice. They want to see a psychologist.
You called it a kite?
Kite, yeah. Yeah, it's a request to see a service, to have a service done for them. So prisoners have a lot of rights in America. So they want to see a doctor, anything. They can just send out what they call a kite. And so they come in, they sit down, they'll say, Mama was an alcoholic or Mama was a crackhead. So I think I have fetal alcohol syndrome. Because when prisoners amongst themselves get together, they say, you can get a crazy check for that. And remember what crazy check is, according to the article. That is if your child has been diagnosed or you've been diagnosed with a disorder, then you can apply for a government check once a month. I don't know exactly how much the amount is, but it's just what they call free money in the ghetto.
Oh, I've got to interrupt this podcast. So I'm sitting there giving this, Marlon and I recorded this last night, and I'm sitting here just kind of giving it one more listen through just to make sure it's in good shape. And I'm kind of reading my email as I'm listening. And I just get this email from Las Vegas, Nevada. I don't know. I'm just speechless and stunned. And I find myself saying this a lot lately. This is the worst thing I've ever heard. Let me read it to you. I just started reading Dear Colin, I just started reading your book, Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. And it prompted me to share a story with you. Las Vegas, 2002. My mother was living in a home in a middle-class to upper-class neighborhood. The complex next door to her had recently become Section 8 housing. She began hearing about petty thefts, car break-ins, and various other crimes, but never did she feel unsafe. The only problem she had to deal with were a group of teenage black kids that lived right over the wall. They were constantly jumping the wall to use her property to cut through, leaving garbage and litter in their wake. It escalated when she caught them breaking her patio furniture. She spoke to one of the adults about it, and she realized they didn't really care that much. They just yelled at the kids to stop messing with that Oriental lady's yard. Oh well, she figured. Next time they vandalize, she would just call the Metro Police. Soon after that, her condo was broken into, home invasion style. She awoke to find 5 black males in her house standing at the foot of her bed. They put a pillowcase over her head and secured her arms and legs with duct tape. The house was ransacked. They found her credit and debit cards and tortured her for the PIN numbers by ducking her head in the toilet. Quote, "You want to F with us, you effing chink bitch?" she recalls one of them yelling. It undoubtedly was the kids from over the wall, and this was obviously their form of revenge. They threw her in the trunk of her own car and said they were going to the bank. She would have to give up those PIN numbers or else. The bank, they moved her to the inside of the car, where she was sexually assaulted. She remembers them laughing and taunting her, making fun of her, pleading for them to stop. She knew if she didn't act quickly and find a way to get out, she would die. Somehow she found the right moment, fought back, and escaped. 3 of the kids were later arrested. The other 2 were never caught. Of the 3 arrested, 2 served little to no time, and 1 was not even charged. They were all minors, and she had problems with identifying them in the lineup, thus leading to a slap on the wrist. The prosecutor said all the kids came from homes where trouble was prevalent. All of them had some sort of juvenile record. None of them attended school. Their families cared little about the trouble they caused in the neighborhood. Just another example of how bad behavior is encouraged in some black communities. Thanks for reading. And if you'd like to share the story on your website, please feel free. I'm really enjoying your book, and I look forward to reading your future work. Wow. We're definitely going to, Marlon didn't hear this letter, but he is going to speak directly to this letter, even though he didn't read it. A little bit later on in the podcast. Let's get back to it.
And
hold on. So, are you trying to say there's an entire industry of people who try to defraud the government by faking certain disability claims?
Absolutely. Not just black, that's white as well. Yeah, it's enormous. It is. Back problems and bipolar disorder are 2 of the biggest complaints. Now, a competent psychologist, we're talking about a mood disorder, bipolar disorder, they can determine if somebody has that through testing. But yeah, it's an enormous fraud on the government.
And so when people hear that fetal alcohol syndrome is now potentially added to this list of reasons why you can get a check, that is kind of like cause for celebration in some ways.
Yeah. If that ever goes through, this black psychiatrist is going to be a saint in Chicago. So, I mean, he will. He's opened the door to enormous cash flow. It's a lot of among the poor, but in blacks in particular, I've found over the years that black people, it's the idea that if you can live off a government, at least a portion of it, you can supplement the rest of your income under the table through usually illegal means. So the free money angle is extremely common. So,
now, there was I was very interested to read in your article. Of course, everybody likes to read the comments too. Mm-hmm. There was a comment from a reader who had a very unusual experience with this. Do you remember that one I'm talking about?
Is that the woman that was threatened?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't have said that's unusual. How about unusual in my little world?
Yeah, right. No, it's like people insist that their child or some of the prisoners will insist if they can get a diagnosis of fetal alcohol syndrome, bipolar disorder, something like that from a state psychologist, that's just about a free ticket for a crazy chick. So
For a long time.
for the rest of their lives. So, and then when I call them in and tell them you don't have it, like I said, starting out, you don't have it, they get pretty ticked off. Of course, they're not going to threaten me in a prison because that'll jeopardize parole. But it's just like take a shot at it. That's their attitude.
And what happened to this woman in the comments section?
Oh yeah, they had a family, black family, follow her and try to intimidate her physically.
Now, where did she deliver this? So she delivered a diagnosis or prognosis they didn't like?
Yeah, they didn't like it. It was not the diagnosis that they preferred.
Was she was outside the prison, though. She was like,
oh yeah, it was a school district.
Oh, school, okay.
School district, yeah. And the family insisted that their offspring there had a disorder that was qualified for a crazy check.
Was it in particular this one, or was it some other one?
I think it was. I think it might have been fetal alcohol syndrome. Yeah, but anyway, they threatened her. She had to get restraining orders on the family. So when they get something in line, another popular one to get it is ADHD. It's attention deficit disorder and this sort of thing. Well, when you come from a chaotic home, the children are going to be chaotic. It doesn't mean they have the disorder, okay? But that's a real common one among the poor. But it's real common among black people, so that's almost a certain crazy check. And you can figure in cities, in the inner cities, what I've seen, it's black tribal loyalty. They'll generally approve just about anything.
What are the I haven't looked at these numbers for a while. I guess I should have looked at them before this podcast. But the number of black children on Ritalin or one of these other anti-ADHD drugs, the percentages, it's enormous.
It is enormous, yes. Ritalin is known as poor man's cocaine. So if you want to get into a drug habit, because you can sell this stuff on the street, Ritalin, it's pretty popular. So it'll have a similar effect of coke.
And so you got all these kids taking Ritalin.
Yeah. It's they can get that speed going, and
it's a stimulant, right?
Right. Understand it very much so. Yes, and the thing is, it has the opposite effect. With somebody truly with ADHD, it will actually calm them down and help them focus. I have had patients that did measure for patients not in the prison system, because part of my practice was with the regular population, and they did test with ADHD. Really, I mean, because the tests are pretty excellent. They're very good, and of course, testimony from the school, and you look at the paperwork. And the parent would come back and said the medication, Ritalin, was wonderful. And it's completely changed, their son or daughter's life. So it does work. But in the criminal justice system, I've never had the case where it was needed at all. So, but it is the most commonly prescribed drug in the inner city, in black communities. And but most of the time, as felons have told me in prison, they take the Ritalin and sell it on the street because it's quite valuable.
So if I'm sending my kid to school, first, if I'm sending my kid to school, there are all sorts of incentives for me to make sure my kid gets all these diagnoses with all these learning disabilities, because that means I'm getting paid. And if I get paid in Ritalin prescriptions, I mean that's a pretty valuable commodity.
Well, it's a double payment. Because you can get the government check, and then you can, on the street, sell the Ritalin.
Yeah.
So, and the Ritalin, it's profitable. It is. Like I say, it's nicknamed by the street people, poor man's cocaine. Works really well.
I had a guy I know a couple years ago call me. He goes, "Colin, you ever heard of this Ritalin stuff? This kid was in college, and this kid was doing exactly what you just said." I said, "Yeah, your kid's taking speed."
Mm-hmm. That's right. So it's got the same effect, and it it's and it can also kill you. By the way, that can off you if you overdose on it.
Hey, okay, we're talking about drugs, and I didn't tell you we're going to talk about this, but let me throw something at you.
Sure.
The last week or the week before, the president issued all these pardons for all these drug offenders in prison.
Saying they're not.
So what do we do? I mean, should we just get the key, open the doors, and throw the doors open and apologize to each and every one on the way out? What's going on?
That was showboating at its best. It's it particularly emphasizes it's a nonviolent crime. Listen, there's one thing you learn in my profession, like in law enforcement learns. The illegal drug profession is violent. It's filthy. It's backstabbing. To say it's a nonviolent offense is insane. What do you think that a drug pusher on the street does when he finds out he's got a competition moving in? How does a street pusher handle a competition?
Well, I learned from Ta-Nehisi Coates that they negotiate.
Yeah, right. They usually kill each other or shoot each other. Yeah.
Okay. Well.
The common one is a bullet to the butt. I'm not making this up. Okay. Because if they it's very highly prestigious for a black street predator to have a bullet wound because they're tough. That means they're really tough.
I've seen father-son pictures where the father is showing off the 15-year-old kid's bullet wounds.
Oh yeah, right.
That was I think his name was Rasan in Chicago.
Yeah. It's they're boastful of it. I'm this tough. But when like somebody disrespects the drug dealer or general thug on the street, but the way to get rid of the competition is to understand now. Street predators love to humiliate their prey, and the best one is to give them the bullet wound, but they shoot them in one of the cheeks of their rear end. So if somebody says you got any bullet holes, they're not going to say, I got shot in the butt because it's humiliating. But that's to get their attention. And then they tell them, you come back here, I'll kill you. And then they do.
Let me ask, it seems to me, again, I'm not a criminologist, and I know and I respect enormously all the time that you spent in the penal system. But when I hear that somebody's in jail, in prison for drugs, what I also understand is that a lot of people with charges don't get charged just for drugs. They get charged for a variety of crimes, a lot of violent crimes. And when it gets down to it, you plead on the drugs because that offers you all this kind of like extra stuff you get in prison.
It does.
And we drop out the violent crimes and the crime stats are good. Am I reading that world in the correct way?
You're reading it perfectly. They fail to show up their previous convictions for violent crimes, and they'll just stress, like Obama did, these are non-violent offenders. These guys are in prison for their drug charges. If you look, it's rare do you find somebody in prison that doesn't have a laundry list of prior charges. It really is. This is somebody that's in prison for the first time. So if you have somebody in prison, you look up there, once in a great while, you'll have a senior citizen that went off the deep end and shot his buddy or shot his wife.
Robbed a bank.
And or rob a bank. Yeah, never been in trouble before. It's like, yep, you'll get those. But the younger ones, are you kidding me? There's always this list. I mean, they have a rap sheet. And so they'll bargain with the drug charge and say, I'm sent to, like I said, the illegal drug industry is huge, and it's violent, it's filthy, it's backstabbing.
Now in Charlotte, North Carolina, the eulogy for the 9 people who were killed in that mass murder.
Sure.
The president gave a speech where he talked about tens of thousands of young black men in prison that are probably there as a result of bias.
Oh, that's baloney. That's absolute nonsense. He's lying, if you don't mind me saying so. I have no idea where he gets his information, but that is absolutely not true. It's understand that a black predator in particular knows that they must demonstrate physical violence to get any respect among his peers. I mean, they have to do that. Otherwise, he will not be taken seriously. And when they get on the yard, right as soon as they get in there, they're going to prove it. So they'll try to pick somebody out to make a little name for themselves. There's no such thing. Well, let's put it this way. I'd be very hard-pressed to find a black street predator who does not have a violent history and a conviction for one.
And so the president wrote letters to all these guys.
Oh, yeah.
I think he visited some of them in prison, or visited a fellow prison. I mean, what are the chances? I forget, what's the number? Was it 42? I forget what the number
46.
was. 46.
Yeah.
So we got 46 guys let out of prison. What are the chances that these guys are going to be caught up? They're going to break the law and get caught breaking the law between now and the 18 months the president has left in office?
Between 90 and 95% chance they'll be back.
How many?
Yeah. 46, I'd say at least 40. At least 40, minimum. Because, first of all, they haven't really learned to delay gratification. Second of all, you make a lot of money selling illegal drugs. They get rich, and you get it quickly. There's no waiting. You don't have to get up at a certain time in the morning. You don't have any self-discipline. All you have to do is be mean. And you get back. I've seen guys. I saw one guy with over 40 years in prison for a murder, a black man, and he was paroled, and he was back in prison in 6 months. His parole officer made an at-home visit unannounced and found drugs and a gun on him. And he sat in front of me right there at one of the Michigan prisons I worked at. I said, "You were in prison for over 40 years, and it took you." "Oh, I didn't do it." I said, "Well, how did the drugs and the gun end up in your taxpayer supplied apartment?" I don't know who put it there. So it's just a very lucrative business. It's also being anything anti-establishment, meaning anti-white, is also righteous. And it's it go back to where the quick and easy money is, and it is selling drugs. So. And they have a population that has no impulse control and very prone to addiction.
Well, so we let all these guys out of prison, and with the prospect of, you almost get the feeling that this was a pilot program, that there's going to be a lot more people let out. And on another level, it really sends a message to all the law enforcement people, federal, state, and local around the country of how they're going to start, how they should be enforcing the law against these innocent angels that are filling our prisons. And plus, I was thinking of Gitmo. I mean, all the people we let out of Gitmo, and how many of them do we find on the battlefield later on?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. But these guys don't have some epiphany in prison. Trust me on that one. It's the one that kind of keeps them out, and it's no guarantee, is aging. I mean, when they get older, and I mean older, they just don't have the energy to do it anymore. So it's you see, I've had, we call in Michigan, we call a person in prison, and the first time in prison, that's an A prefix. Second time in prison, a B prefix. I've had black guys in prison with G and F prefixes. That's how many times they've been to prison. It's one people the general public can't really wrap their heads around, or have a hard time doing it, is a career criminal is just that. They break the law. They do that. So what they do is they keep going until they get caught. They also like the cat and mouse game with law enforcement. That's fun. That's exciting. They believe that if they succeed selling illegal drugs, they're a real man, because look what I did. I can fool the man and I can get rich. And their idea of rich is having gold chains and gold this. And
I'm down with that.
I'm down with that.
Hey,
yeah.
Hey, can I tell you about a phone call I just received 10 minutes ago? It came from a cop. I get these calls and emails, but this guy wanted to talk, so I said, sure. So I talked for just a couple minutes. I said, I got to call you later because I'm doing this podcast with nationally known psychologist Marlon Newbern. But even in the few minutes we were on the phone together, the first thing he said was, listen, 10 years ago, when you stop somebody, this is a big city cop, right? Big city. When you stop somebody, they would either comply or run. He said, today there's defiance. You say, take your hands out of your pockets. They'll say, I don't have to do that. You say, get out of your car. I don't have to do that. And so there's all these like courthouse, ghetto lawyers out there that are telling everybody you don't have to comply with lawful orders of the police.
Yeah. We call them latrine lawyers. So they automatically turn into a latrine lawyer. There's tons of them in prison, and black and white. They the ones that are career criminals. They're the ones that will say you don't have to do this, don't have to do that. Well, the fact is they do have to do that.
I mean, that woman in Texas, Sandra Bland, I saw the sheriff of Milwaukee, Clark County, I forget his name, the black sheriff, and he said, listen, I've seen that video. That officer gave her several commands, legal commands she did not obey, that she was legally required to obey. And apparently now this defiance, black on cop, is now just something every cop is dealing with every day. I don't see how this ends well.
No, it's they end up, it is galling at times where you have to defend yourself against these people. I mean, it's just like, oh my Lord, because they make up something, and the law says you must listen to them and you must take their point of view, and you have to consider this, and where you're nice and kind and sweet and loving, and I would just, no, I wasn't. None of the above. I told them where they're going to stand, and you have the privilege of anonymity that comes with the uniform of being a psychologist. Other than that, you don't have the right to a diagnosis you demand. So
you don't?
No, you don't have it. Nope. You come to me, you're going to get an honest, straight up diagnosis from.
You're a buzzkill, man.
I am a buzzkill. I am a buzzkill. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So you've run into a lot of cops in your career. So all of a sudden, we get cops that are being openly defied, taunted, harassed, attacked, threatened. Yeah. And what psychologically, what are the implications for having this entire profession being treated this way on a daily basis?
Oh yeah, it's going to really create some havoc. I mean, I met some wonderful law enforcement people, really, in my career, just great people. Eventually, though, it's going to just absolutely add tremendous amount of stress.
Hey, if I were a cop a year from now, I'd be mapping it out. I'm saying I'm going to see Marlon Newburn. I don't care how much of a hard ass he is, pardon my bad language. I'm going to get myself a little PTSD syndrome here.
That's legit. That's legit. I mean, when your life's threatened and, you get assaulted, I mean, these people actually taking swings at him, shooting, trying to stab him. This sort of thing, you could do so much, and it could be a righteous PTSD diagnosis.
I'm not a psychologist, of course, but I get a lot of calls. The big city cops. Yeah. And sometimes I meet them. Sometimes I'm traveling through their town. I pick them up, and they drive me to a radio station or to a book signing or something.
Sure.
And I can just, you know what, man? They're wound. Some of these guys are wound so tight.
Yes, they are. Yeah. And it's like, I just, I've talked to some of them. I've had them in therapy, and I'm telling them, look, you're going to have to make a decision. You have a supervisor. When they get some upper management, law enforcement officers are politically tied, so they make a lot of money, but they bow to the politician in charge, and so some are willing to throw these officers under the bus. And when you have that stress going on, and then you have this other stress on the street.
The other day, I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to talk about that one point. I was talking to a cop from, let's just say, extremely large city in the American Northeast. I asked him that exact question. I said, do the cops feel like their bosses have their backs? He laughed.
Yeah. It's a horrible situation for law enforcement officers.
And this is another story the guy told me. So this is a white cop, 10 years experience. He sees a guy on the street that looks suspicious, started talking to him. All of a sudden, the guy started getting real belligerent, hostile, telling the cop what he can't do, calling the cop racist, the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
10 minutes later, we figure out this guy works for the district attorney.
So he's been baited.
no, I don't even know if it was a baiting. It was just this guy thought he was a black guy, thought he was entitled because he worked for the district attorney. Nobody could touch him. And I don't know. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but there's so much crazy racial stuff going on out there. And we ask cops to figure it out for us, and we get a little surprised when they can't figure it out any more than we can.
Yeah. It's they know it's these little weak egos, and they give them positions of power, and so they want to flex it against those people who least deserve abuse. And the fact is, if a law enforcement officer knows that management doesn't have their back, and they might be prosecuted for just doing their jobs, the stress can be at times unbearable for a lot of them. So I've recommended, the fact is, put up boundaries, personal, keep it quiet. You'll do so much on the job. Pull back when you have to, if you look like it's going to be jeopardy for you, and draw your paycheck until retirement.
Oh man, I tell you, so let me ask you this: you got a friend, or maybe a nephew, or even a niece, or a family member. They're young, 20, 21, 22. They're in college studying criminal justice, and they say, I really want to be a cop in New York, Chicago, Baltimore, Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Minneapolis, Seattle, Milwaukee, Dallas, Houston, L.A., San Francisco, Kansas City, St. Louis. What do you say?
I tell you better rethink that. Because the fact is, if you're white, you're going to be, and you go to a predominantly black community, you're going to be stigmatized right off the bat. And you'll be subject to affirmative action, meaning others will get promoted over you. It's in their laws, and they're allowed to do it. So you're going to also, if something goes south on an arrest, you're going to be suspected of murder or worse. So you might want to rethink your career plan.
Is it okay? I don't think people, when I talk to cops, and they've convinced me, and I talk about this all the time on my YouTube channel and in my book, Don't Make the Black Kids Angry, blah, blah. Cops are subject to relentless racial harassment, taunting, violence.
Oh, absolutely.
And how can that be good psychologically? I mean, how can you look somebody in the eye and say, yeah, being a cop would be good for you? No, it'd be like, no, I don't know what the answer is other than just me talking to you personally. This is like a nightmare. Why do you want to do that?
That's just it. Well, you have to, if it's a young person too that says they want to be a cop, you have to give them the reality. Okay, it's so the fact is they're idealistic. I mean, Detroit for years, it hasn't happened recently, but years ago, these young graduates of college, they want to be teachers. They want to teach in the inner city. They're going to really turn around young black lives of black children, and they don't last. They don't last a month.
I have this. I talk about this and Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. There's a story about St. Louis and the school district where Michael Brown was, Ferguson. Like in those districts, St. Louis and that, like the new teachers, like 1 year, like 50% didn't even last the first day.
Yeah, right. Remember, this is a population that's not used to taking personal responsibility. I know that's not a popular thing to say, but it's something that's true. There's also what's called black toxic tribalism, that even if somebody is absolutely the most horrendous personality on the planet, a black person or child, if it's a white teacher, but now black teachers are catching it too, and they walked into that minefield, they'll say, what did you do to set them off? You don't understand black kids.
You said that. As soon as you said that, as soon as people say these things, I always get these videos running in my mind, right? So I can see this. I can see this video. East Coast teacher, a black woman in tears at a school board meeting, saying exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
She's speaking perfect Queen's English.
Yeah.
She really went into this thing expecting she was going to set standards, change lives. And she said the minute she walked in the door of her classroom, she was assaulted, harassed, taunted, nonstop because of the way she talked, because of the way she acted. She was acting white. And this was like, finally they got physical. And then when they got physical with her, That's when the school district came in and started saying what you said, which is, what did you do to cause that?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's so much of that. Teachers now, when teachers complain, they got so much stuff on violence and violence against teachers. Most of it black on white in schools, and there's so much of it. When they go to that's the default response now, which is, you can't handle your class.
Yeah. It's just amazing that. Remember, we had to talk about once the locus of control. Well, the people in charge have an external locus of control. What that means in psychology talk.
I was hoping you would tell me, because I don't know.
Yeah. Locus of control is in the Judeo-Christian tradition, America for since the founding. The respected person, the person who got along socially, was very pro-social, had the manners and all this sort of thing. But the locus of control is internal, meaning if you run into somebody that's a real jerk, okay, I mean, really just an obnoxious creep, you will turn around and walk away and say, what an obnoxious creep, and nothing comes of it. You go into a restaurant, and the restaurant is poor service and lousy food. Your internal locus of control says, last time I'll go to that restaurant, and you leave after you pay your bill, respectfully. Well, when you have an external locus of control, that means you are just standing there, and the world better operate to your wishes, demands, desires, or they'll feel your wrath. And that's an external locus of control. It's very immature, extremely narcissistic.
I was going to say narcissistic.
Narcissistic, and it's primitive. It's very primitive. The two groups, with some studying and discussions I've had with other professionals in the field, found out there's two groups in the world now that have the external locus of control. In other words, if you walk down the street and you look at a couple black guys standing there, and you don't look at them, or you look at them in a suspicious way or just a way they don't approve of, they have an external locus of control, and they will accost you. Okay? How you're looking at me? What you looking at? What's this? You didn't say thank you in the right way.
I used to play golf. I used to play golf with a guy who was profoundly deaf.
Yeah.
But if he was looking at you, he could understand every single thing that you said.
Yeah.
So he was telling me, this is a guy who's also, he's functioning. He's like runs a restaurant, right? Anyway, I played golf with him a lot. So one day he goes, I was in a liquor store the other day, and I turned around, and this black guy was really angry with me. He was going to attack me. And I said, what are you talking about? He says, I kept talking to you and you didn't reply to me, and he was going to beat the hell out of my buddy. So my buddy explained, I didn't hear a single thing that you said. And that was a profound thing to do.
Yeah.
Hey, can I ask you, I didn't tell you we're going to do this either. Can I tell you something that happened to me this week?
Sure.
And get some good psychological counseling on it?
Sure.
So the last podcast that we did, on not you and I, the last podcast we did on this channel, it was a couple days ago. I talked to two kids, I call them. They're both late 30s or mid 30s, about what it was like going to a white person to go to school in a black school. And as I said in that podcast, this was something that, this happened to all my friends growing up. I went to Catholic school, they went to public school, and I'd come home after school. They would tell me that going to and from school and in class was one long battle of black on white crime and violence.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm listening to these guys, and of all the guys, like 20 guys, everybody hangs around with about 20 people. Of all the 20 people that were in public schools, probably 15 of them dropped out. They didn't transfer, they dropped out. And their life, for the rest of their lives, I can give you their names, but Danny, Tony, Gary, Davey, Alan, and the rest of their lives was one long, they were living in the gray area, the shadows, petty crime, drug use. They just never got on track. So I'm listening to these two kids that I was talking to got on track, but they were telling word for word the exact same story. Tell you the truth, kind of bugged me a little bit. It did. I can, you know, I look at all these, I look at all these things, and I decided really early on when I was going to do this that I was not going to get pissed off at every single little thing, every single big thing. I was going to be distant. That way I felt like I could be a better reporter and give people better information. But it bugged me. Anyway, so the next day after this, I did these interviews. I went to a college class. And it was an American history class, and, you know, the teacher is a big fan of the book. So I went into the class. Probably like 30, 40 people in there. And, you know, when you say college class and night class, of course, you're not talking about 18-year-old kids with horn-rimmed glasses. You're talking about adults, 25, 30, 35, 40. So I'm sitting there doing my little dog and pony show and blah, blah, blah. But then I encouraged the back and forth. But I kind of got short with a few of them. Because I feel like when I was done talking to those kids, it was really kind of on my podcast, it was really kind of a reaffirmation, which is, you know what? I'm a witness for these people who are living and dead. Now, I feel like I'm a witness now, and I feel like I have a responsibility to tell the truth. And so kids would ask questions. They would say, well, Colin, I was watching the Baltimore riots, and I noticed there were a lot of white people and Asian people rioting too. I said, that's a fairy tale. You made that up. And if you're going to be in an institute of higher learning, listen, we have to insist on the truth. Then somebody else said the same thing. They said, well, you know, in this town, you know, the jails, it doesn't matter. Crime's colorless. Could be all kinds of different people are in jail. I said, that's not true either. A white girl put her hand up and she goes, I live in a wealthy neighborhood and we can't tell that, you know, and crime is colorblind here. I said, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. Then a black woman walked. She asked me this question. I always forget how we got on the topic, but she asked me this question. And as soon as she asked me, by the way, I actually thought of you because I said, okay, I got to give the Marlon Newburn answer to this question. She goes, are you really trying to tell me that you think black people are more violent than Asian people? I said, oh, absolutely. She got up and walked out.
Reality is just way too much for some people, especially those that haven't grown up yet. They could be 50 years old, but they have the emotional maturity of a child. And the fact is, I don't like hearing bad news either. I mean, you know, hey, Mr. Newburn, you're having an audit from the IRS. Oh, terrific. But, you know, you go face it, and what's the problem here, and so on and so forth. But, yeah, there's such thing as toxic tribalism. It's rampant in the black community. To have your black racial bona fides, you must mindlessly agree with anything that they say that's of benefit to black people, to include rejecting any personal responsibility for their own demise. I mean,
I had a guy on my radio show here, a former state senator. I invited him on the show because I saw him on TV he has a Sunday show where he said he was so sick of the crime. He was a black guy. His name is Herman Holloway Jr. He was so sick of the crime, he was going to get some of his buddies. He's about our age. Going to get his buddies with some, you know, sticks, and he's going to go find some criminals, bang down their doors, and beat the hell out of them. I mean, he's talking pure vigilante stuff, right?
Yeah.
I get him on the show, and I kind of repeat almost word for word what he said on his radio show.
Yeah.
And he started giving me grief for saying that. And I've heard this more than once, that the black people just do not want to hear it on any level from white people.
No, they don't. No, it's because that's what binds them, a general hatred for non-black people.
Question. How many non-black people have an inkling as to what you just said is true?
Oh, very few. I mean, there's a blanket hatred of non-black people in the black community. Not saying all black people hate white people and Asian people.
Yeah, you know what? This is one podcast where we don't have to like attach 26 pages of qualifications to every single thing we said. You and I did not create this incredible hyper-racial society we live in. We are observing it. And we don't have to apologize or qualify every single thing we say, because guess what? When you turn on black news or you read a black magazine or a black website, believe me, they're not looking over their shoulders and darting their eyes as to what can and cannot be said.
Correct. And that's just it. Because black people as a group have an external locus of control, you better watch what you say. Otherwise, you're going to feel my wrath. You better make sure whatever you say about me is good. Otherwise, you'll feel my wrath. And I have the mainstream media and politicians on my side. So
Jesse, I think you know him, Dr. Jesse Lee Peterson. He has.
Yeah.
He might be the most important guy. I call him, I say you and Jesse Lee Peterson might be the two most important guys in the country, because he's been telling his audiences for a long time what you and I don't think I ever, that's how I figured it out talking to him. I was a guest on his show. I was supposed to be the one imparting this great amount of wisdom. I'm listening to him going, I think that makes a lot of sense, because he's the one who says that white people do not realize the amount of racial hostility that exists black on white.
Yeah, it's tremendous. Even the ones, you sit there and you talk to them as a prison psychologist, and they've done horrendous things, these black felons, like other felons have done, terrible things, but they will also ascribe part of the guilt of why they're in prison to white people. And I've asked them, just like, okay, I'll walk into this just for grins. How did a white person cause you to shoot the guy down the street because he was encroaching on your drug turf? Well, when there's very little opportunity. I said, wait, hold it. You have affirmative action. You can get into a college I can't get into due to your color. You can be hired on a job that I would be qualified for, but you'll get it because of your color. You will be promoted on a job over me, even though I might be more qualified because of your color. Now let's start again. How did you end up shooting the guy down the street for encroaching on your drug territory? And they just get quiet and look at you bug-eyed and everything else. It's like,
you're repeating word for word what happened in a Rochester courtroom a week ago, except this guy was being sentenced for killing a cop.
Mm-hmm.
He gets up in the courtroom and he goes, I'm guilty of being an African-American man. We don't have any chance. And that's what I'm guilty of. That's it. I never had a chance in my defense. You violated my rights. He never said he didn't kill the cop.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But it absolutely, that's rampant, is where they come across as, And
I think the important point for listeners of this podcast is that, and I'm actually writing another article about it's already done, but about this is not the outlier view. This is mainstream. There's a guy named Ta-Nehisi Coates. He right now has the 7th best-selling book on the planet Earth. He's a black guy in his mid to late 30s, and he writes for Atlantic Magazine. Toni Morrison declared him the new James Baldwin. Obama invites him to the Oval Office for private meetings. What he says, and so he's basically saying the identical thing that the guy standing in front of the judge is saying. Yeah. And this is not an outlier. I'm convinced. That's why we're doing this. You know what? That's why you and I were doing this podcast, why we do these articles. I just don't think people have a sense of what the real world looks like today.
Well, they don't too. Plus they're fearful of giving their opinion on black perceptions of white people. They don't want to be called a racist, because if anything looks, not complimentary, they'll be called racist, and for some reason, they just about go fetal around that.
Okay, you know what? Here's going to be one of my new themes for the next year, I think, is that it's going to be this witness theme. So if you're just a person that has been, doing the whole denial thing, a white person been doing the whole denial thing, and you're a liberal, and you're going to be in denial, that's fine. But if you're a person that stumbled onto this podcast, if you're a person that read my books, and where Marlon Newburn is featured prominently, if you're a person that watches my YouTube channel with all this enormous amount of video of black mob violence and black on white crime, that places you on a different level of responsibility. Denial is not an option for you anymore. You are now a witness. And now if you're listening to this podcast, you have to decide what part of the planet, how much of this planet you're going to carve out and insist inside of that patch of dirt. We are going to tell the truth, and we are going to demand the truth. Am I being unreasonable with our podcast listeners?
No, you're not. You're being very realistic, and it's very healthy to do what you're doing. There's nothing wrong with being honest with the way things are. And even though perceptions, they say, can be different, that's baloney. There's reality and existence.
And neither you or I we're advocating calling anybody names. We're not
No.
talking about being angry, but we are
No.
saying, listen, there's something really, 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 really wrong in this country today, and way too many people are ignoring it, denying it, excusing it, encouraging it, and even lying about it. And that's the truth that we have to tell and demand others tell.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's black people are going to have to finally get honest and look at themselves, even at the dirty parts, do an inventory. Do you understand the basis of all, from humans, instability is blaming and damning others. That is the basis of all.
Would you say that again? Whenever you say, I've heard you say this before, and I don't, you can't. You could say that 100 times, and I would say, could you say that one more time? Because that's enormous.
It is. It's Albert Ellis finally does over a lifetime, and he died when he was in his 90s. I believe he was in the 90s. He said the basis for all, and when that hit me like a brick many years ago when I read it, of all emotional instability in a person is blaming and damning.
Blaming
others.
and damning. So you gotta, man, if people walk away from this podcast with nothing else, blame, damn, blame, damn, blame, damn, blame, damn.
Yeah. Blaming and damning others is the basis of all emotional instability. And it really is. It will destabilize anybody if you entertain rage and resentment against someone. The most toxic emotion you can harbor is resentment. And the way blacks are controlled by their power elite is to the old Machiavellian method. Cultivate an outside enemy, real or imagined. Keep them resentful. Keep them angry.
I mean, what is, we don't need to get too political on this, but at the same time, okay, say you and I were Democrat political strategists looking at the year 2016. What is the catastrophic scenario for us? It is black people do not come to the polls because Barack Obama or a black person is not on the ticket.
Yeah.
That's catastrophe.
Yeah.
And so I just I look in the newspaper all day, TV all the time, and I see Hillary talking about that chick in Texas who committed suicide, saying Black Lives Matter. I see Martin O'Malley going to a Black Lives Matter conference, and he backs. Oh, did you see that video?
No, I didn't see that.
Okay, so Martin O'Malley gets up on a stage at a Black Lives Matter.
He said all lives matter?
Yeah. He said white lives matter, black lives matter, all lives matter, white lives matter. And then after he got booed off the stage. Then later in an interview, by the same cast of characters, a woman explained to him why this has to be exclusionary. It has to be only Black Lives Matter. And he apologized like the meekest, weakest, I'm going to use a lot of curse words here. I'm going to avoid wussiest person I've ever seen in my life.
Oh yeah. He should, that was embarrassing. I felt embarrassed for him. It's like you didn't say anything wrong. I mean, because he violated a rule. If it's black, they're special and exempt.
So do you get the sense that the Dems are in a panic because of this? And there's got to be a black person on that national ticket. Period.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, and of course, you also have to sing the song of imaginary victimhood. I mean, you have no power without that victimhood. So,
I call that the greatest lie of our generation.
Oh, agreed.
That black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. That's the biggest hoax of our lifetimes.
It is. It is. And how many people buy it? That's the biggest comedy act of our lifetime. It's beyond just puzzlement. It's like, good Lord.
But guess what? A lot of people buy it. But I'm here to tell you that because of people like you, that a lot of people are saying, "Hey, wait a minute. I don't think that's true anymore." That's psychologists. I'm telling you, when I write articles with you in it, or when people hear you on this podcast, they don't even care about good old Colin. No, nobody cares about Colin. That's fine by me. Everybody wants to talk about that Marlon guy. I get people sending me emails going, "Hey, Colin, you ought to show this to Marlon, see what he thinks about that." So I'm just telling you, you are filling a void That is, oh man. So I thank you for doing this. I know I ask you to do this a lot, but I happen
No, I
to think of
appreciate
what you're saying is unbelievably important. Hey,
Yeah,
can I
well-
read you a quote from Pittsburgh?
Sure.
This is from an article that I sent you this morning, and you were good enough to give me some quotes on. So in Pittsburgh, it was the year 2011, and Pittsburgh, the black leaders of Pittsburgh knew they had a problem, a big problem. And here's the problem. The problem was there were too many black people in the news that were accused of killing, robbing, assaulting, jacking, shooting, stealing, rioting, breaking, burgling, harassing, intimidating, threatening, fighting, throwing, running, stoning, smoking, drinking, escaping, drugging, firing, and destroying. And so a bunch of black leaders got together and said, we got to change that. But they didn't want to change the crime. They wanted to change how it was reported. So they had a big meeting with all the media in Pittsburgh. And here's what one guy said. The reason why, he said, if the only information about black people is what's in the news, there's a reason why unemployment rate is astronomical and why we have all these negative issues. How you like that? Negative issues. Nice.
Mm.
Because the imaging of black people is extremely negative, said Black Political Empowerment Project President Tim Stevens. Quote, not only does it affect the viewpoint of white people with their thoughts on black people, I say it affects the psychology of black people. So we got a guy for practicing psychology without a license out there in Pittsburgh. And by the way, Pittsburgh, all the guys, oh, by the way, they had this big meeting. And I think this article will be out tomorrow in American Thinker or the day after. I don't know when. They had a big meeting and all the media guys were like, oh, yeah, we're down with that. Yeah, we're happy to do that. We're just going to, we apologize for having all these images of black people committing crime. And we're just not going to do that anymore. When in fact, at the time, as I documented in my books, local news just does an enormous amount to ignore, deny, and condone this kind of violence. But that wasn't good enough. So all of a sudden now we understand that there's psychological things at play, damage being done by people reporting about crime. What's up with that?
Oh, it's like they've just reversed it. It's another tactic of getting the personal responsibility away from the perpetrator. And, putting a little coating on the rampant violence. Let's put it this way. You couldn't take a sober adult, put him in a black neighborhood, and any neighborhood in Detroit, and I bet you they will never say, I love what you've done to the place. I mean, it looks like a third world country. It is destroyed. The city has been basically destroyed. And
I have it on a authoritative source. That is Rolling Stone magazine, that the only reason Detroit is the way it is because white racists let it get that way.
Oh, no. No. It's like the power establishment, black and white, the liberals, they're very liberal, let anything go. Was anything go there? They had all the money they wanted, everything they needed. It was just a great big piggy bank for every crook under the sun. And the Detroit City Council has always been like a confederacy of dunces. I mean, almost like a Keystone Cops. But no, it's that writer in Rolling Stone is lying through his or her teeth.
And so what about all this psychological damage that is being perpetrated on black people when they have to pick up a newspaper every day or when they, good God knows what happens when they go to my YouTube channel or read my books. Is this like, am I doing damage to people that read my books?
Oh, of course not. No, you're telling the truth. Psychological damage is if you cover for the people who are doing all the troublemaking. Committing all the crimes. That's the damage you're doing. You're empowering the criminal. And that's what liberals do, white liberals and blacks do, is they empower the criminal by redirecting personal responsibility, making sure government money flows into the ghetto for imaginary ailments. I mean, it's a life, it's a perverted lifestyle because nobody's going to hold them accountable. And to do so would be considered cruel. And
okay, so flash forward to the year 2015.
Mm-hmm.
You grew up in Detroit, And Detroit is probably like lots of other places where you have these every ethnic neighborhood from from that were settled 1890, 1900, 1910, 1920. They all had their own Catholic churches.
Sure.
This church named St. Basil was one of those churches. But those days are long gone. Now it's in the middle of a black neighborhood.
Yeah.
Black, maybe a little gentrification going on. They had a carnival there a few nights ago, St. Basil's, and hundreds and hundreds of teenagers in and out of this parish fair. Sorry, I'm on my back porch smoking a cigar and a cop rolling by here. I can see the siren. I can see the red lights flashing. Anyway, at 200 and so they took the TV out there, and you could hear you could just see it. One guy goes, there were all these, and he paused. He looked for the right word. He came up with teenagers. They were running at my granddaughter, and I pulled her out of the way. She could have died.
Marie Anderson can't believe it.
Where's the fair?
Ramon Key is incredulous.
Baffled, shocked. Shouldn't be like this.
Even Angel Carpenter is upset.
They run the fun for everybody.
St. Basil's Church in Carrick is sorry, but the fun is officially over.
And now I hear it's going to be gone for the rest of the world. Oh.
Marie heard all the commotion Wednesday night.
I seen a lot of kids up here, but I didn't realize there was a fight.
And it was that fight
oh my God, I could have lost my granddaughter last night.
that really frightened Mark Deegan.
And my granddaughter was about maybe that far away from me. And all of a sudden, a whole bunch of big kids just started running. She just missed getting trampled. Just missed.
Police report hundreds of teens fighting on Brownsville Road.
At first it was slow, then it got really busy, then everything just started happening, chaos, everyone running up the street fighting, screaming, cops around, crazy.
And with parishioners and families in danger, St. Basil pulled the plug on this 60-year celebration.
Yeah, there was a couple fights, a little bit of drama, but I mean, forever just is overdoing it.
You think they should keep it going?
Yes. Though this teen admits his generation causes too much trouble.
It's a shame that evil has to win out over good. That bothers me.
The teens accused of tying up store manager, spraying cleaning chemicals into his eyes and making off with a safe. They were just walked out by police. They're in custody now. The robbery happening at McKeesport Shop and Save on Fifth Avenue. The suspects, just 15, 16, and 18 years of age, will all be charged as adults.
And every single person, then they started to come out. Oh yeah, it's been happening here for a long time. So then it gave me an excuse to go into stuff happening in Pittsburgh in the last 6 months. Dozens of examples of large-scale black mob violence in Pittsburgh, and every one is the same. Every time the reporter does the story, and they ignore the fact that the central organizing feature of the violence is the race of the participants, and they all pretend they are surprised.
Yeah. It's, they have to put on this act of not holding responsible the people who are doing the fighting, the assaults, the damage, and it just absolutely reinforces the crazy behavior. And it's because it's like a religion now. Liberalism is considered by some, I don't know who wrote the essay at one time I read, but it was pretty accurate. It's a religion, protecting black people from their own behavior and pointing fingers at them for their own behavior. Now is a religion.
A sin.
It is. It's like thou shalt not say anything bad about black people. It's killing.
They canceled that. They canceled it opening night.
Oh yeah.
And don't make the black kids angry. I have like 3 or 4 chapters on black mob violence at carnivals and fairs and state fairs, and I broke it into 2 groups. One, these are places. I named them, documented it. These are places that have canceled their carnival or fair because of black mob violence. And I documented how a city manager was calling me all sorts of names because I was going to say that. Mm-hmm. Then the other group of chapters is I kind of line it up under the name of these are places that wish they had canceled it. And it's not just the big cities again. It's like there's these little bucolic places out in the middle of nowhere, place 30 miles from here in New Jersey. A couple months ago, they had a little They had a week-long carnival for a Pee-wee football league. This is like in the middle of a white suburban area, right? All of a sudden, 50 to 100 black people show up. Cops are end up in the hospital. There's video with broken shoulders. They were fighting in and out, destroying property, defying police. I don't know what we're going to do with our public spaces anymore if the police decide they can't enforce the law and no one's going to demand they enforce the law.
Yeah, and that's just it. If they have a politician that won't back them up, why should they enforce the law? If they're going to throw a cop out of the bus, then I would support that cop any which way they decided to react under those circumstances, because these are human beings. Cops have human beings. They have mortgages. They have responsibility.
By the way, what you said earlier, I found to be 100% true in my own life. Cops are the good guys.
They are. Yeah, I'm, without batting an eye, I am 100% pro cop, and that's it. I've known so many state troopers, sheriff's deputies, city cops from different cities. It was extremely rare when I ran into one that I didn't consider a straight shooter, straight up, walk tall, good person. And
what did George Orwell say? He said, I'm going to paraphrase here. He said, the reason that you and I, Marlon, are able to sleep soundly in our beds at night is because of the willingness of rough men to do violence in our behalf.
Amen. Amen.
If somebody calls me and says, Colin, I'm down here in the ghetto of Wilmington, Delaware, and somebody's burglarizing my house. Would you please come down and help me?
And so that's just it. I mean,
I'm not a tough guy like you, Marlon. I'm not going to go down there.
Yeah, I'm not a tough guy anymore either. So never really was, actually. But it's just it. It's like, law enforcement's going to come and they're going to put a lid on things. I mean, they're going to confront the evil and listen, if they don't start, supporting their law enforcement, look at New York. I mean, the mayor demonizes his own law enforcement body. So
unbelievable. Yesterday in Chicago, I posted a video this morning in Chicago. There's a car where they found 2 dead bodies. So they came and they towed the car away.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, there was a crowd of 100 to 200 black people that were challenging the cops. People were doing the old rip their shirt off, and taunting, cursing the cops. The courthouse lawyer showed up to decree how, they couldn't do that, take the car out like that. They had to remove the bodies first. I don't think a lot of people realize why so many first responders on the ambulance crews are wearing bulletproof vests now. I document how they are under physical attack as well.
Sure. I mean, there might come a time when they're going to have to let black communities just stew in their own juices. They have something go wrong, nobody's going to show up. And it's their own fault.
That happened, just a couple weeks ago. A black woman, a first responder, what they do, right, and you know this, what they do is when you get a 911 call and you're driving an ambulance, you won't go there before a cop gets there.
Correct, yeah.
So this woman was on the outskirts of of where she needed to go. She says, no, I'm not going there. And and the person died. And all of a sudden, everybody's going like, why didn't you respond? Why didn't you go? That person died. She goes, I'm not. And I think this was a black woman. And now she's being chastised for that.
Yeah, right. It's because her life could be in danger in a split second. And it most likely would have. It's there's something understand one thing in the ghetto, in black communities. Anything that's not welded down and weighs 17 tons will be stolen. It just will be stolen. It just will happen. Anything shiny, new, and bright will be stolen.
And so this new defiance, it's not just defiance now; it's also physical, right? Lots of bottles, lots of rocks being thrown at the cops, at the people we see in the supermarkets on Saturdays, just shopping for their families. They put their lives at risk for what?
Yeah, for what? And that's just it, because they know the power elite in charge of that community will defend the thug way before they'll do it for a community servant. And
so now we got Rand Paul running around kind of parroting what Obama says, that there's all these people in prison basically for no reason whatsoever other than they're there because we have a racially unjust system.
Yeah.
Is he helping to empower the bad guys? And do you see?
Oh, yes, he is.
Do you see any hope on a national level that somebody's going to step up and say, hey, there, we have the crime rate between white and black people is really, really bad, and we got to do something about it besides blaming white people.
Yeah, we have to, and we have to also cut off the faucet of cash from in programs, and because I remember Rand Paul promising at Ferguson, we promised more trades program, schools and work programs and everything. I'm thinking, just another politician promising money for.
Marlon, I believe that is the absolute worst case of political pandering I have seen in my lifetime.
It was like, that was a forehead slapper. It was like, my God, reward insanity, reward violence. You just did it, Rand Paul. It's any behavior, you remove responsibility for, you reward in any way, financially or otherwise, you'll get an increase in the behavior. Blacks do what they do because they know they'll get anonymity and they'll get support.
And so he goes around the country saying a lot of good things about lower taxes, lower regulation, creating jobs.
Yeah.
Maybe telling people we don't have to send, all these troops into places where we don't know that, we can't even pronounce the names of the cities.
Yeah.
But that one thing he said to me is a deal killer for him. It shows totally irresponsible.
Oh yeah, I mean that's like, where in the world have you been? I mean, he spoke like he's just out of college, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this retro '60s stuff has been so disproven for so many years now. Are you kidding?
That's the weird thing about it. I see all these videos and in these small, where the action is to me in the small places. I consider Dayton a small place. Places like Dayton, Utica, Peoria, Springfield, and you get all this really, really nasty black mob violence and black and white crime. And somebody shows up and so they say, "Well, this happened in at St. Basil's in Cleveland." Somebody shows up and goes, "You know what? We just got to do more social programs," as if we haven't tried that every minute of every day for the last 50 years.
50
years. All it's done is make it worse. It's almost like, we tried that and it's turned into a disaster in every one of the 1,000 places we tried it, right?
Yeah. I mean, come on. It's like, what does it take? I mean, we all have, any human being in life, you get yourself in a negative pattern of thinking in any facet of your life. Eventually, if you do it enough times, a light goes on and you say, I'm not going to do that anymore. Okay. I got 2 drunk drivings. Guess what? I can't drink and drive. I'm not going to drink anymore.
That's an example. That's an example. That's not a confession, by the way, on your.
Yeah, right. It's like, I'm wrong here. I can't do this. The thing is, we continue to do this. It's like, let's reward it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Okay, so we see a scenario where at some point, somebody, I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow, 10 years from now, 20, at some point, somebody's going to say, listen, this really doesn't work anymore. This whole welfare, cradle to grave welfare dependency thing. We have to start scaling it back. That's not going to be received well.
Not at all. No, that's a one-term politician who says it.
No, I was actually thinking of the political career. I was actually thinking of the reaction in the streets.
Oh, yeah. That will be rioting and, it will be burning and mayhem, this sort of thing. I'll show you, I'll kill me kind of a thing. And so, yeah, of course it will. Yeah, it's like if you haven't earned what you're getting, you don't get it very long, is what this politician should say. There'll be death threats against him or her who says that. And the thing is that the violence will start ending rather quickly. You'll see an initial increase in the violence after the programs are cut back, but then you'll see a slow reduction of them. When people realize, oh, well, this game's over, I guess I should pay attention in school. For instance, in school, they have a violent child, and believe me, they start early in elementary school. You tell the parent, get them under control. It's your responsibility, your child, or they can't come back to school. And it's really that draconian if you have to do that.
It is now the official policy of the United States of America government, plus lots of state and local governments, that any disparity between white children and black children in school, whether on discipline or on academic performance, is because one reason only: white racism.
Yeah, well, that's a lie, of course. And that is the policy, true, but it's a lie. It's because of the behavior of the individual. And they get into group speak, and they don't have to take responsibility for their actions. So
is there a way this ends well?
No, not really. Not really. It's because it's basically the inmates are running the asylum right now. And the fact is, America's going to run out of money, just like Greece is doing. I don't know when it'll happen, but it's just going to run out.
We can't keep, if you talk to a rich person, they'll say when they talk about all the, the deficits and the bonds we float, they say we're lending money to ourselves.
Really?
That's how they look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the fact is, it's like we're going to run out of money. It's that simple. And the thing is, there's going to be nothing left. I mean, you can only make up so many maladies to complain about so you can get a free government check. Fetal alcohol syndrome, what great incentive to get out and get drunk, okay? Or to know you can get a check once a month for the rest of your life. All you have to do is get violent. Are you kidding me? That is the preferred lifestyle in the ghetto. Being violent. The more violent you are, the more status you have. I mean, it's like this couldn't have been written by anybody. Hitler couldn't have beat this little scenario. I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely insane how you can kill people through government policies, and they're doing it.
And you're standing up. You are telling the truth about it. A lot of people are listening to you. I'm very grateful for the fearless way you talk about it. We've been going on for a while. You and I, when we get talking, we could go till dawn talking about this.
Sure.
Why don't we wrap this one up? And I think the listeners of this podcast and readers of my books always want me to extract a promise from you that we could do this again in very short order, because you really make a lot of sense out of what's going on out there.
Well, thanks, Colin. Yep, I will be glad to come back anytime. Anytime. I'm going to put some more articles out about it, and we'll see how that goes.
Marlon Newburn, thank you very much for being my guest on this podcast. This is Colin Flaherty, reminding you of one thing, whether you're in Chicago or Philly or Detroit or in school or in a courtroom, reminding you of one thing: don't make the black kids angry. Listen, I know this podcast is getting long, so we're going to wrap it up right here. But I had to tell you something else that happened. Just in the course of me listening to this podcast, getting ready to post it, send it all out to you guys. And if you haven't subscribed to this podcast, I hope you'll do so. Tell your friends about it, share it, post it on your Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff. So anyway, I'm going through the motions here, and I get a call from Chicago, a Chicago cop. He introduced me to the scariest word I've heard in a very, 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 very long time. He said, "We are now going through a period of depolicing." I said, "What?" He said, "Depolicing." Depolicing means what it sounds like it means. Cops are withdrawing, giving up the streets. And if you don't think that's the most dangerous thing you've heard in a long time, you better get your mind right. This is Colin Flaherty. I'm sorry I have to remind you again, if you're in Chicago and you're depending on the cops who are now talking about depolicing, then all I have to say to you is one thing: don't make the black kids angry.